This is a map of Hawaii, an island state in the western United States located 2,000 miles from the U.S. mainland. Hawaii comprises almost all of the Hawaiian archipelago and is home to the Mauna Loa, which is possibly the greatest volcano on Earth. Besides Mauna Loa, there are 4 other volcanoes that make up the island of Hawaii. These include Kohala, Mauna Kea, Hualalai and Kilauea. The 5 shield volcanoes erupted somewhat sequentially in the past, and now Kohala is extinct. Mauna Kea and Hualalai lie dormant, whereas Mauna Loa and Kilauea are active. These are also part of the Hawai'i Volcanoes National Park. Geological evidence has suggested that 2 ancient shields named Ninole and Kulai were buried by the young and active Mauna Loa. Nowadays, geologists consider these outcrops a part of the earlier building of Mauna Loa, which accounts for more than half of the island's surface area. Since Kilauea and Mauna Loa is still active, the island of Hawaii is continuously growing. Mauna Loa is the largest subaerial volcano not just in mass but also in volume. The only historically known volcano bigger than Mauna Loa is the Tamu Massif, an extinct submarine shield volcano located in the northwest Pacific Ocean. Mauna Loa has relatively gentle slopes with an estimated volume of about 75,000 cubic kilometers, but its peak is around 38 meters lower than that of Mauna Kea, which is also its neighbor. So far, the lava eruptions from this gigantic volcano have been silica-poor and pretty fluid. They also tend to be non-explosive in nature. The massive supervolcano has probably been erupting for at least 700,000 years now, and experts believe it emerged above sea nearly 400,000 years ago. The Mauna Loa derived its magma from the Hawaii hotspot, which is responsible for the creation of the Hawaiian island chain over a span of 10 million years. Geologists have predicted that the slow drift of the Pacific plate will carry the volcano away from the hotspot in about 1 million years, and it will eventually become extinct. But for now, it's here right over the hotspot, brewing and blowing as it keeps humanity on edge from the fear of a devastating eruption. The most recent eruption at Mauna Loa occurred between March 24th to April 15th in 1984. While the recent eruptions of this giant volcano have been casualty-free, the 1926 and 1950 eruptions did destroy villages. Mauna Loa has been included in the Decade Volcanoes program, which encourages the study and analysis of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world. And because Mauna Loa fits the very definition of dangerous and potentially hazardous volcanoes, the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has been intensively monitoring it since 1912. Most people think an asteroid will strike the planet and end life here, or maybe a nuclear war will, but there's also another gruesome way for life as we know it to come to a sudden halt. The raging magma building pressure, eager to ooze out from the Earth's surface, can also destroy the planet we live on. From northern Nevada through southern Idaho and up to northwest Wyoming, there's a scary amount of volcanoes scattered intermittently, stretching about 560 kilometers. Some of these are supervolcanoes and are nearly 18 million years old. So what exactly is a supervolcano? Well, it's a volcano with a documented past eruption having a volcanic explosivity index of 8, the largest ever recorded value on the index. The volume of deposits for such volcanoes is always greater than 1,000 cubic kilometers. The supervolcanoes form when magma from the mantle of the Earth makes its way to the crust but is unable to break through it. Pressure keeps building in the massive and continuously growing pool of magma until the crust finally gives way. Unable to contain the pressure, it ruptures. This can occur at hotspots like the Yellowstone caldera, the Hawaii hotspot, Louisville Ridge, St. Helena hotspot, Canary hotspot, and others. The large volume supervolcanic eruptions are mostly associated with the large igneous provinces where lava and volcanic ash can cover huge areas. Super eruptions can be incredibly devastating. They can cause long-lasting climate changes, wipe out species, and even humanity. The most recent super eruption with a VI8 happened 26,500 years ago in the Taupo volcano located in New Zealand. The Deccan traps were produced by the Reunion host pit around 66 million years ago, and according to scientific consensus, this event being coincident with the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event wasn't a chance occurrence. Similarly, the largest flood basalt event, called the Siberian traps, occurred about 250 million years ago, and this was coincident with the largest known mass extinction in the history of planet Earth, the Permian Triassic extinction event. This clearly indicated that if the volcanoes go rogue, no one can stop the end of the world from happening. Mount St. Helens, an active stratovolcano located in Skamania County, Washington, is also a part of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, a segment of the Pacific Ring of Fire. On May 18, 1980, a major eruption by this volcano resulted in the deadliest and most economically catastrophic volcanic event in the history of the United States. A series of phreatic blasts from the summit escalated into a major explosive eruption that took place at 8:33 a.m. on the fateful day. This eruption had a volcanic explosivity index of 5. The eruption was preceded by a 2-month-long series of earthquakes and steam venting episodes. An earthquake on May 18th caused the entire weakened north face to just slide away. This sector collapse was the largest recorded subaerial landslide in history. The partly molten rock, rich in high-pressure gases and steam, suddenly exploded northward towards Spirit Lake, and a hot mix of lava and pulverized older rock took over the landslide. The eruption column from Mount St. Helens rose to a whopping 24 kilometers in the atmosphere and deposited ash in 11 states, along with some Canadian provinces. This also caused the snow, ice, and several complete glaciers on the volcano to melt. This melting resulted in a series of lahars that reached as far as the Columbia River. The thermal energy released in this eruption was equal to 26 megatons of TNT. About 57 people were killed, and the property damage amounted up to $1.1 billion. And this was just a VEI 5 eruption. Can you imagine the consequences if one of the supervolcanoes erupted? The fear of a similar or even more devastating volcanic event is keeping the scientists up at night, especially the active ones like Mauna Loa and Kilauea. Scientists have been monitoring the unsettled geological activity on Hawaii's biggest island, and according to them, a dominating eruption of the volcano that could destroy the landscape isn't imminent just yet. However, Mauna Loa may be waking up from its long slumber. Being half of the island's mass, any surge of activity in Mauna Loa means the entire island and the region around it could be in grave danger. Its neighbor Kilauea has been in the throes of a fierce and sometimes destructive eruptive period for many decades now. The huge eruption from Kilauea in 2018 flattened an entire residential neighborhood. About 2,000 people were displaced as a consequence of that eruption. This dramatic activity of Kilauea has been stealing attention from the biggest sibling, who has been asleep since its last eruption in 1984. In March of 2021, the Hawai'i Volcano Observatory recorded more than 200 small-magnitude earthquakes underneath Mauna Loa. These, along with other observations indicating increased activity, suggest that the flow of magma into the shallow storage system of this volcano has increased. It's now an established reality that Mauna Loa is waking up. Scientists are emphasizing that an eruption isn't around the corner or a necessary outcome, but HVO has urged that now is the time to revisit personal eruption plans. Areas on the western shore of the island, just south of the main tourism hub of Kilauea Kona, have been deemed the most vulnerable. Here, the lava flow in case of an eruption would reach the ocean and the populated areas within a matter of hours. In the previous eruption of Mauna Loa in 1984, lava reached the outskirts of Hilo on the other side of the island, but it took several weeks to get this far. The earthquakes that shook the Hawaiian peak the previous year were followed by enhanced seismic activity on the summit that lasted for a good few months. Mauna Loa has erupted around 33 times since 1853, but since the 1984 eruption from the summit crater, it hasn't seen any eruption or active lava flow. The last eruption of Mauna Loa was so intense and massive that the lava only stopped 7 miles from Hilo. All of this activity and even the existence of the Hawaii island chain can be attributed to the slowly drifting Pacific plate of the Earth. It's drifting across a hot spot in the Earth's mantle by a few inches every single year. This adds up to around 32 miles per million years. The rising magma from this hotspot pushes up and out of the shield-type Hawaiian volcanoes, leading to a constant growth in the islands. The rising and releasing magma and gases beneath these volcanoes make the Earth move. This movement is often manifested as earthquakes, thereby indicating that another eruption is possibly on its way. Such seismic spikes have been observed before previous eruptions too. This is exactly why the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is reminding the residents to prepare for a possible eruption, just like the residents of any area seeing regular hurricanes prepare for the season in advance. Pre-planning and vigilance will come in handy in case of an emergency. Depending on where and how the eruption happens on Mauna Loa, the speed at which the lava flows reach various areas would greatly differ, as indicated by this lava flow response time map issued by the USGS. The seismic activity at Mauna Loa right now is not even close to what it was in 1985 or in the previous eruptions yet. But with such active volcanoes, it's not a matter of if it erupts, in fact, it's a matter of when it erupts, especially now that the activity on Mauna Loa has gained momentum. And not just Mauna Loa, the risk of other Hawaiian volcanoes erupting has also substantially increased. It's important to understand that we don't even know where the lava flow in case of an eruption might come from. As in the 2018 eruption of Kilauea, the lava didn't come from the famous crater. In fact, it oozed out from dozens of fissures that opened in a residential neighborhood. Scientists are doing their best to predict and prepare for these eruptions. They warn people to stand alert, but the locals have their own belief system too. There's a saying in Hawaii about the goddess of the volcano that Pele goes where she wants. So when she starts to move, all people can do is move out of the way and hope that she wants them beforehand. However, this doesn't mean the locals don't prepare for impending disaster. Nowadays, they pack go bags containing all the essential items in case they have to evacuate in an emergency. They usually keep all important documents like birth certificates, deeds, legal papers in their go bags, along with food, medication, and personal hygiene products. It has to be noted that an eruption at Mauna Loa doesn't necessarily mean a threat to the locals or their property, as half the eruption recorded in the history of this massive volcano have remained contained to the remote summit region. But that doesn't mean people should be careless, as some eruptions have sent lava flowing into the ocean within a few hours. The extent of an eruption is difficult to predict ahead of time, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Besides, lava isn't the only harmful product of an eruption. The toxic gases coming along with it can also be fatal. While the Mauna Loa keeps the residents of Hawaii on edge, there's another giant with much more hazardous eruptions in its history that might also be rising from its slumber, making the worst of our nightmares a possibility. Yes, we're talking about the Yellowstone caldera located in Yellowstone National Park. Scientists are now trying to predict how this ticking time bomb will explode while hoping that it just fizzles out. This sleeping giant in the western United States occasionally stirs up, but so far it hasn't fully woken up in 70,000 years. However, it will be incredibly difficult to deal with this forceful beast when it does finally wake up. This massive supervolcano sits in a hotspot made of molten and semi-molten rock and is breathing in and out thanks to the movement of magma underneath it. The magma underneath Yellowstone pools into a magma chamber or reservoir only 6 to 10 kilometers beneath the park, causing the ground to swell and rise. And when this magma finally starts cooling down and solidifying, the ground falls again. Since 1923, volcanologists have been measuring this activity. According to them, the ground rose nearly 25 centimeters between 2004 and 2009, but in 2010, the land began to fall. This slow and steady rise has puzzled many scientists who believe this activity may be a premonition of an impending eruption. They're worried that the eruption at the Yellowstone caldera will be much more intense than we fear from Mauna Loa's eruption, owing to the history of this supervolcano. According to Dr. Steve Anderson, a volcanologist and earth science professor at the University of Northern Colorado, scientists don't know what to expect in case the Yellowstone volcano erupts. During July 2022 this year, the University of Utah seismographic stations located 59 earthquakes in the Yellowstone National Park region. These stations were responsible for the operation and analysis of the Yellowstone seismic network. The largest event of the month was a minor earthquake of 3.1 magnitude and was located nearly 14 miles south-southwest of Mammoth Hot Springs. It occurred on the 30th of July at around 1:44 a.m. This event was part of a swarm of 13 small earthquakes that occurred between the 29th and 30th of July. Such earthquakes account for about 50% of seismic activity in the Yellowstone region. The continuous GPS stations in Yellowstone caldera have also recorded a few millimeters of uplift close to the Norris Geyser Basin since the beginning of summer. The deformation has been attributed to snowmelt that percolates into the ground and causes the surface to swell up like a sponge. This signal is an annual occurrence and is superimposed on the yearly trend of the caldera subsidence. This has been ongoing since 2015 at a rate of 1 to 2 inches annually. The current activity in the caldera doesn't indicate an eruption coming in the near future. Learning from the past is necessary in the case of this supervolcano. The level of recent underground activity has fueled some speculation regarding the intensity of a future eruption. In the past decade, the volcano has continually risen at the fastest rate ever recorded. The Yellowstone region averages between 1,000 to 3,000 earthquakes every single year. While most of them are unnoticeable with a magnitude less than 3, these quakes do tell the scientists a lot about the speed of magma filling the chamber underneath. A rise in the rattling and shaking in the park may suggest a fresh batch of magma has recently pooled into the reservoir. However, because absolutely everything happening in the caldera hasn't been analyzed for long, it's not easy to predict what exactly is going on. This makes it harder for geologists to estimate the next move of this massive volcano, rendering it all the more dangerous. The analysis of the Yellowstone volcano's distant past does provide some clues, however. Geological evidence points that the Yellowstone has produced 3 colossal eruptions in the past 2.1 million years. Volcanologists have stated that these eruptions occurred at gaps of nearly 600,000 years to 800,000 years. Evidence suggests that the last great eruption occurred 640,000 years ago and is sprawled throughout the park and across thousands of kilometers of the landscape surrounding it. Each of the 3 eruptions vomited out massive amounts of volcanic ash, gas, magma, and other debris that ended up covering most of the continental US. Some of the material from the past explosions has been found as far away as Louisiana. And after each eruption, the volcano collapsed on itself, sucking in trees, mountains, and almost every other thing in the landscape. The depression formed as a result of this activity is called a caldera, and experts have warned that a caldera-forming eruption event in Yellowstone will be a colossal natural hazard. They've also explained that the last Yellowstone eruption was nearly 1,000 times greater than the devastating Mount St. Helens eruption that killed more than 50 people, thousands of animals, and burnt hundreds of square kilometers of land in Oregon and Washington. The last explosion from the Yellowstone volcano shot a fatal plume of ash, lava, and toxic gases thousands of meters into the air. A third of the continent was plunged entirely into darkness by this event. The pyroclastic flows sped across the region at astonishing speeds, burying and shattering almost everything that came in their way. The magma spilling out of the ground scorched the beautiful landscape for many kilometers. Some evidence of the last eruption is also found in the 50 kilometers wide and 70 kilometers long Yellowstone caldera. The remnants of the volcanic debris can still be observed in an area now called the Lava Creek Tuff. So what will happen if Yellowstone does erupt? Well, according to experts, the lava from the volcano will probably destroy just about everything within a 40-mile radius of the blast. Major cities like Denver, Salt Lake City, and Boise would possibly be wiped out. The massive amounts of volcanic materials in the atmosphere will eventually rain down toxic ash across the whole of the US, but the Northwest will face the worst conditions. The ash will also kill plants, animals, crush buildings with its weight, block the roads, and completely destroy the farmlands for an entire generation. According to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the eruption of Yellowstone can estimatedly cause $3 trillion worth of damage. However, the most horrific aspect would still be the loss of life. The scientists are hoping that such an event doesn't occur. They've established that such explosions are extremely rare. The last lava flow from Yellowstone took place around 70,000 years ago, but even today hikers come across evidence of the previous eruptions in form of distinct rock layers along the trails. Today, scientists are keeping a close eye on every single hiccup of this volcano now that its activity keeps warning us of a major event in the future. The 1815 explosion of Mount Tambora, located on the Sumbawa Island, modern-day Indonesia, can provide us some insight into what a massive eruption from one of the world's active and potentially hazardous volcanoes will look like. This has been deemed the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. The VI7 eruption spewed out 160 to 213 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere. This was the most recent confirmed VI7 eruption. Mount Tambora reached its climax on the 10th of April 1815. A rise in steaming and small phreatic eruptions occurred during the coming 3 years. The ash from this eruption was dispersed around the world and led to the lowering of global temperatures. This prompted what we now know as the year without a summer in 1816. Around 11,000 people died from direct volcanic effects of this eruption, and between 49,000 to 90,000 deaths resulted from the consequential famine and epidemic diseases on Sumbawa, Lombok, and Bali. A significant period of climate change led to extreme weather and harvest failures around the globe. The Mount Tambora eruption may have been devastating, but our planet has faced much worse. Some 200 million years ago, huge and widespread volcanic eruptions triggered the end Triassic extinction, believe it or not. This massive extinction decimated 76% of all marine and terrestrial species and marked the end of the Triassic period. This was the event that cleared the way for dinosaurs to dominate Earth for the coming 135 million years. Not a lot is known about what caused this extinction, but most scientists agree that the massive volcanic eruptions from a large region over a short period of time played a key role in this. The large region, known as Central Atlantic Magmatic Province Camp, spewed huge amounts of lava and gas containing carbon dioxide, sulfur, and methane. This sudden burst of gases may have created intense global warming and acidification of the oceans and ultimately resulted in the death of thousands of plant and animal species. The researchers at MIT, Columbia University, and many other acclaimed institutions have now determined that these eruptions occurred exactly when the extinction began. This is strong evidence favoring the theory that volcanic activity indeed triggered the end Triassic extinction. From their measurements, a team of scientists have reconstructed the volcanic activity in this region 201 million years ago. According to this reconstruction, the eruption of magma occurred in repeated bursts over a period of 40,000 years. It's a pretty short geologic period. Sam Boeing, a professor of geology in MIT's Department of Earth, Atmospheric and Planetary Sciences, stated, "There's no question the extinction occurred at the same time as the first eruption. If activity like that happens again, there's a thin chance that humanity will be able to survive it. Should we seriously start thinking about packing our bags and moving to Mars in the future?" The latest volcanic eruption that frightened the entire world began on the 20th of December 2022 on the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai. This submarine volcano is located in the Tongan archipelago in the southern Pacific Ocean. The eruption reached a powerful and immense climax around 4 weeks after the initiation of 15th of January 2022. The Hunga Tonga lies only 65 kilometers north of the country's main island named Tonga Tapu. It is part of the highly active volcanic Tonga Kermadec Islands volcanic arc. The eruption was rated at least a VEI 5 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. The eruption triggered tsunamis in Tonga, Fiji, American Samoa, Vanuatu, and along the entire Pacific Rim. As a consequence of this eruption, damaging tsunamis struck the coast of New Zealand, Japan, the United States, Russian Far East, Chile, and Peru. At least 4 people lost their lives and many were injured. Some even remain missing to date in Tonga from the tsunami waves that reached a height of 20 meters. It was the largest volcanic eruption since the Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991 and most powerful one since the 1983 eruption of Krakatoa. Experts at NASA determined that this eruption was hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. This means it was far larger than any other 20th century volcanic event of nuclear bomb test, only rivaled by Krakatoa eruption, but it took place in the 19th century. An official at GNS Science explained that the suspected cause of the tsunami associated with the Hunga Tonga event was an undersea eruption that destroyed a part of the island on the 14th of January. This caused seawater to fill in the volcanic vent, triggering a second undersea explosion the next day. The second explosion was so huge it penetrated through the overlying water and initiated the tsunami. The economic damage from this eruption in Tonga amounted up to $90.4 million. The Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery reported that 600 buildings, including 300 houses, were damaged by the tsunami. Around 85% of Tonga's agricultural economy was also severely affected. Now, experts may be optimistic that such catastrophic events will not be occurring anytime in the future, but there's really no way of absolutely determining what's going on in the hotspot under these formidable volcanoes. At some point, one or more of these supervolcanoes are bound to explode, and we don't know how humanity will cope with the brunt of such a deadly event. Besides, what can we actually do except evacuate in case indicators of an eruption appear right? So among all the other possible catastrophes that can wipe out life on Earth, we need to keep in mind that a likely source of devastation is the magma brewing beneath us. In your opinion, which of these, the world's most active and dangerous volcanoes, is most likely to erupt first? Let us know in the comments.